Okay, so what I wanted to do was run through a quick look at Linux Mint, and I believe this is 22.1, a relatively new release of it. This is what you'll be booted into when you boot into the ISO. And it looks like it's using the 6.8 kernel. I don't know if that'll be updated once we install the system. I believe this is based off of Ubuntu 24.04. Of course, Linux Mint takes out all the snap stuff and all that kind of stuff. This is an extremely popular distribution with people who are new to Linux and people who just started using Linux Mint and just stuck with it. It's a good, stable system. They have, I believe, Flatpak already installed and set up, although I think they disable the non-verified to begin with, so you got to enable the verified. But we'll look into some of that as we install it. So what I wanted to do is just run through the installer real quick, do a short video on Linux Mint, and this is a great alternative to those who are, one, have maybe an older system that Windows 11 isn't compatible with, or they're tired of the Windows spyware basically that is default on Windows 11, and since Windows 10 is going end of life very soon and people curious about Linux Mint is probably what I would recommend as your first Linux distribution to try out. It's got a lot of good information on the internet. You can find how to set the system up. Again, this is one video on the internet on YouTube about it, but there are millions, probably, or hundreds at least, of Linux Mint install and configure videos. There's a YouTube channel I recommend. I think it is Linux for Seniors, I believe, although it's not just for seniors, but he does really good tutorial videos on a lot of the basic and some advanced functionalities of Linux Mint and other operating systems, and he goes through how to set up systems that are for people who may be new to Linux, and he goes through the step by step. He really does teach really well. I don't know if maybe he was a teacher, a retired teacher or something, because the way he teaches on there is very reminiscent to me of a teacher. So he does a really good job. I think it's Linux for Seniors. I recommend that channel. If I can remember, I'll put a link to his channel in my comments. He does an amazing job, so I do recommend him big time, especially if you're new to Linux and new to the like Linux Mint or any of the other operating systems based on Linux. He does a great job. But what I wanted to go through is kind of show you the installer. Again, it'll go through the keyboard layout that you'll want to use. I go ahead and set up, I shouldn't hit the back button. Alright, install multimedia codecs. You're going to want to do that to enable those playback formats that you may need. So those are really good. You could do an automatic configuration if you need to set up partitions yourself, but I'm not really going to go through that right now. The defaults are pretty good. I would recommend just having a dedicated disk for this system. You can dual boot with something like Windows fairly easily. It'll usually detect it pretty well. But my advice is to have a separate disk just for that. So that's what I would go with. And my son is wanting a drink, so I am giving him a drink. I have a nonverbal autistic son, and he I usually do these videos while he's asleep, but he is awake right now. I am an autism parent, by the way. I have 2 autistic kids, and they are my full-time duty, and I love them to pieces. So if you hear some strange noises in the background, that would be my autistic son, and I make no apologies for that. He is an awesome kid. So anyway, I just would go ahead and just, in this virtual machine, just erase the disk, kind of do the default settings, because this is kind of what you're going to be met with. You don't really have to change anything much, especially if you just have your own disk that you're installing it on. Generally, it'll pick the right time zone that you're in, but if for some reason it doesn't, you can go through here and pick the time zone that you need. And then it'll set up your user that you'll want. So I'll go ahead and do that. It doesn't mind you using a short password. Some distributions don't like you using a short password, but this is just a test install. I'm not even going to be keeping this VM, so I use a short password just for the purposes of testing. You can have it log in automatically if you really want to. I don't recommend that for security reasons, but hey, if that's something you really like, just want your system to boot right on in without having to put in a password or anything, you can definitely do that. That would be good if you're not worried about anybody accessing your system. You're just not concerned about it. You can encrypt your home folder so that people can't get into your files. If for some reason you have a laptop or other people might be using your system, they won't be able to get into your files as easily. So a little bit of extra security. Linux Mint's been around for quite some time, and it's kind of been known as a easy system for people to use, but it's still very robust. My wife used it for quite a while. She switched over to Bazite recently and has been enjoying that system, and I may do a video on that system eventually, but that's more for gaming. And you can game on Linux Mint fairly easily, especially with Flatpaks. Doing things like Steam and Lutris through Flatpaks makes gaming on Linux Mint pretty easy. The only issue you may have sometimes with Linux Mint is that it may have an older kernel, but I think they've fixed some of those issues. Because I think now they do use that hardware enablement kernel that comes with the latest versions of the point release of Ubuntu. Before, it just used the older kernel. Still wasn't too difficult to get a newer kernel if you needed to, but that was an issue before. It seems like they fixed a lot of those issues now, where it gets some more up-to-date kernels and hardware support. So generally speaking, unless you have a extremely new system, it will work just fine. And most things are kind of set up out of the box. For example, I have a Brother wireless printer, and it is automatically detected. Like, as soon as the system's installed, it sees my printer, and I'm able to use it out of the box. I don't have to do any configuration or anything on it. That's very similar with like Ubuntu and Fedora and stuff like that. It'll usually be detected pretty easily. I really do recommend Brother printers, especially if you're using Linux. They just set up real easy, and they set up easy for Windows and Mac and things like that as well. So if you're looking for a printer, I definitely recommend Brother printers. They're great, especially for Linux and stuff, and they work great. The one that I've had for several years, and it's still chugging along. All my Linux distributions that I've tried, it's not been very difficult to get it set up on. Even something like Gentoo and Arch, it's generally not very difficult to get it set up even on those systems. You may have to run through a few more hoops to get things up and running with things like cups on those sort of systems, but with something like Linux Mint, Ubuntu, Debian even, it's usually set up, for my system especially, it's just set up automatically. Since I have a networked printer, it just sets it up automatically and goes with it. So that's something that I definitely recommend in that sort of situation. Just going to let it install. A lot of times I would pause the video during this, but I figured we'd chat about it for a little bit. Now I may cut some of this out. I don't know. It generally doesn't take too awful long to install. But the one thing is, I don't believe it is pulling packages from the internet. I think it is pulling from the actual ISO. As far as I know, there is no like net install for Linux Mint. I haven't even tried like something more advanced like debootstrap with Linux Mint. I don't even know if that's possible. It's something I may need to look into if you really want a more minimal install of Linux Mint, but that's kind of not what Linux Mint is designed for. So probably once this is installed and booted up, there will probably be several updates to to do. And that's one thing I definitely recommend when you first install a system, no matter which Linux distro it is, or even if it's Windows, is once it's a fresh install, make sure you run all your updates and all that stuff. That can get rid of a lot of bugs and issues and security problems right out the bat. Just install it, update it, and then go from there. Reboot, and then go from there. So this isn't taking too awful long to install. We'll let it run for a bit. Okay, and now that was it. So now we're going to reboot into the actual system. You can obviously keep testing if you're wanting to like look around the live environment. And that's a good idea. Like just boot into the live environment, see how it runs on your system before you install it, so you can play around, see if it's even something you're interested in installing, see if some of your hardware works. So that's the cool thing about the live environment. You can kind of play around and test it around without even installing it. Let's go ahead and reboot. And you'll be, as soon as you reboot, you'll be given the welcome screen, or not welcome screen, but the login manager here, and you'll just put in the password that you did when you installed it. And I'm going to real quick set my display settings so you can see a little bit better. There we go. Usually it'll probably automatically detect your proper resolution and all that. It's just in a VM, sometimes it doesn't detect what the resolution will be, but usually on most systems that I've installed, maybe I'd have to change the refresh rate, but usually it'll detect. The welcome screen's pretty good. It kind of goes through some of the basics here, welcoming you to the operating system and all that. You can go through the first steps, so you can change your color scheme. So if you click on this, you can go to dark theme, which is what I usually go with. I like dark theme. That may not be the best for a YouTube video, but we're going to go with it. And also you have the accent colors. So as you can tell, for example, like the folders and all that, and the selection, you see how that's blue, and then you got the folders that are this color. You can change those to something I kind of like. Personally, I like purple. I think that looks really cool with this system, so I usually switch it over to purple, but you can obviously choose any system you like. There are other themes you can get for the system pretty easily, but these works really great, and I think it looks really pretty slick, pretty modern. Again, they're using the Cinnamon desktop environment. That's kind of their default. You can get XFCE and go that route, and that'll give you a more minimal system, especially if you're running on like an older laptop or an older system. Cinnamon can be a little bit more resource heavy. It's not too bad, especially on a modern system, but if you have a very old computer or an old laptop, you may want to go with the XFCE edition, which still looks very similar and still has most of the capabilities. It's just using a lot less resources. You can do your snapshots. That's one thing that they do really well. For backups, you can, I don't have it set up for Btrfs, but if you set up Btrfs for your system, it can back up using Btrfs snapshots. But if you do just what the default is, you can use rsync, and basically what that does, it just syncs your files. So you can sync it. It's going to estimate, I don't have really anything else installed right now, but it will take your drive here, and it can sync your drive to create a backup. This is probably something you're going to want to do every now and then. You can create those snapshots and then go back to them. This is really cool that this is set up out of the box, and this is great for if you're tinkering around in your system and you kind of break something. As long as you've snapshotted it before you do anything stupid, you can go back to it really easily. So that is a very powerful, and you can set up automatic snapshots, I believe. But that's a very powerful system for Linux Mint. Your driver manager, you can go in here and you can get into any drivers you will need. This is especially good if you're using something like NVIDIA. There's not going to be anything on this system, but if you're using something like NVIDIA or a piece of hardware that needs a proprietary piece of drivers or software, that can be here. This is especially good if you're using an NVIDIA GPU, which again a lot of people do. That's a very popular GPU, so you can get those additional GPUs there. Here's what I really wanted to do was go into the update manager, because I'm assuming there's going to be quite a few updates. It's already telling me that there's a new version of the update manager, so let's go ahead and apply that so we can get the latest update manager. And this is a very pretty system. I mean, the system is set up very well, and yeah, we see we got 90 updates. It's quite a few. That's not too bad though, considering this isn't a rolling release. This is a point release. They're based off Ubuntu 22 or 24.04, I believe. So as there's point releases and things like that with Ubuntu, there will be more updates, and they will keep those security updates going. I think they also have some stuff in their own repos. For example, like Firefox, which is a snap on Ubuntu, is actually in their repo. They have their own repo of Firefox, so it's not going to be snap. Because if I open a terminal here, I don't even know. There, it's Control Shift. If I open a terminal here, yeah, it's still using 6.8, but you can do a where is command and see if something's installed, and if it shows snap but nothing there, then snap's not installed. But I do believe it has Flatpak. Yeah, Flatpak is installed. So, and I think that's what they recommend for most things. So you can get some newer software and some things in the Flatpak store. So that's a good thing to have. I'm going to go ahead and run these updates just so that we have them, because I am curious if it pulls in a new kernel or anything like that. Again, it defaults to Firefox. If that's an issue with you because you don't like some of the stuff Mozilla's doing lately with their terms of service and such, it's very easy to install newer or different browsers on there, especially through Flatpak. You can get, Brave, Chromium. You can get straight up Chrome, Vivaldi. Lots of different browsers are available, and it's all fairly easy to install. We're using the welcome screen to do all this, but I'll show you how to use just the standard system here, system installer and all that. It's designed very, very well for Linux and very, very well for new users. While it's doing that, again, you can go in here and you can customize. So, there's lots of customization options. I would just toy around with it, like going into settings, themes. You can go to advanced settings and you can add, remove themes. You can search for different themes they have on here, so you can add those. The same thing with like icons. You can select which icons you like. You can install new icons. Again, if you go to Linux for Seniors, he has several videos on how to switch and change icons for your system if you're wanting something new. The same thing with like mouse pointers. He has some videos on going through that, how to do it, install new cursors and new icons and all that. He does a great job, so I don't really see a reason to go through all that at the moment because he does such a good job. Again, I recommend his channel for that. Backgrounds, it's going to have several installed, and that's one of the cool things that I like about Linux Mint is they have some of the coolest default wallpapers that you can have. I like some of these colors, some of these abstract colors and things I think are really cool looking. Yeah, they have, you can do mountain scenes. They have just some really, really great quality wallpapers right out of the box. I really like these abstract, colorful ones. Those are probably some of my favorites. You know, all these kind of stuff's really, I dig that a lot. Alright, so our system is completely done. I don't think it asks you if you want to reboot. You can also, what this is asking for, if you want to switch to a local mirror, and that's just something, it can switch to a mirror that's closer to you, so you can pick what server, what mirror you want. The one I was using here seemed fast enough, so I'm not too worried about it. PPAs, that's like additional repositories. You can add your own if you really want to. Now, I've had issues where I've added like the Mesa PPA that was from Ubuntu. That actually caused a lot of crashes on Mint, so I don't recommend using that, even though that works well in Ubuntu. With the PPAs, you want to be very careful and do your research before you add anything like that. If you happen to add a separate repository, like say the actual Brave repository or a separate kernel repository, that stuff can be managed here if you really want to. But since we had some pretty decent size updates, I want to go ahead and restart the system. That way all that stuff gets applied. Whoa, that's creepy looking. That's just a VM. An issue with the VM. There we go. That rebooted quick. And here we are back. This will show up every single time, this welcome screen. If you don't want it to, just click this little thing here at the bottom and it won't show up every single time. So the actual software manager that they have right here, which I think it's their own. They don't use GNOME software or anything like that. I think this is something they've created themselves. Linux Mint has. I don't know if it's based off something else, but it's fast. It really works well. Like say OBS is through Flatpak. I believe by default they only have verified apps, so you'd have to go into preferences. Yeah, here it is. See, Flatpaks, it will only use verified apps, and what that means is that's Flatpaks that are kind of used by that are created by the developers themselves. There's lots of Flatpak software on the FlatHub that third-party people have created that isn't from the actual developers of that software. Generally speaking, those are safe and fine to use, but if you're really concerned about it and only want to use Flatpaks that are from the developers themselves, you know, keep this unchecked. They really don't want you to do this. So you know what? We're not going to. So let's see if most of the things we want are verified or not. If you're looking for a piece of software and it's just not in here and it's not in the repos, main repos, go ahead and select this unverified apps and then do another search and you might be able to find what you're looking for. So let's just look for Brave. Yeah, Brave is verified. It's on Flatpak, so I can install that. It'll tell you all the other things. This is all just dependencies from Flatpaks that it'll need to install. One of the things with Flatpaks is they're going to be a bit larger than, going to take up more disk space than standard system packages. So you could go to like brave.com and enable their own repo, and it'll be a little bit smaller size because this is going to take up, it's showing me like almost 4 gigs just for a browser. It'll be a lot smaller than that if you use the system packages, so you can go to like brave.com and install it that way. But this is just so much easier. It stays up to date on its own, and it works well. So wow, look at how fast that started up. So you could set Brave as your default. You can keep Firefox as your default. This is a very fast and snappy system. And the cool thing about Cinnamon is that it is very reminiscent of like Windows 7, Windows 10. If you're used to those systems, it's going to work great. And it is very snappy and very quick. So even on a lower powered system where like something like Windows 10 or Windows 11 might be a little sluggish on your computer, installing this is probably going to run considerably faster. Again, your mileage may vary, but this is great. So you can get Brave. You can get now something like, say, Chrome. It's going to have Chromium, but it's not going to have like Google Chrome. To get, say you really, really want Google Chrome, you really need it. It's not a verified app, so you will have to enable the verified apps. And then, if I'm not mistaken, you should be able to get standard Chrome. Maybe, if it'll load. We may have to exit it out and try again. So let's just see if it will have Chrome. Alright, there's Google Chrome, and it gives you a little warning here that it's unverified. So, you know, it's going to make sure, you know, hey, you're installing something that isn't from the actual developer or anything like that. But you can still install it, and you can still use it. So, you know, if you really need Google Chrome or a piece of proprietary software that's not in here, that's not verified, you could enable that verification, the unverified, and it'll work. So, and then you can get your Google Chrome. And I ain't signing into nothing. But, you know, again, Google Chrome, hate it or love it, you know, it's still a standard system, you know, used by a lot of people. If you work for a company that demands you use Google Chrome, you know, you may have to, may not have a choice. But it is here if you need it. Something like Discord, you know, again, you can do that. Steam, if you're doing games, I think they have both the system package and the Flatpak, so you can install either or. And again, this is unverified because Steam doesn't create their own Flatpak. Steam recommends you actually, I think, download it from their website and install it. I haven't had any issues using the Flatpak version. I don't think I've used the Linux Mint packaged version, so I can't really give you any advice on that one. I've always went with Flatpaks, and it seems to work just fine. So, you know, if you're wanting to install Steam, I personally recommend the Flatpak, even though it is unverified. I've not had any issues using it, and it will use a more up-to-date Mesa and all those sort of things, and it seems to work fine. The only issue you may have with it is if you have your games on a separate hard drive, you'll have to kind of go in and enable access to those drives since you're using a Flatpak. So if that's an issue for you, you might want to use the repo version or just go to Steam and download the deb file from Steam itself. Again, you can look all that stuff up. It's not that difficult to figure out if you're a gamer on Linux. If you're a gamer on Linux, you probably already know all that kind of stuff anyway. So I really like their software manager. I think it's probably one of the best software managers on Linux. It's fast. It has everything installed or kind of configured automatically. The only caveat, again, is the unverified apps, but I kind of get why they do that. It's just if you don't know that, you may have a problem like, why is Google Chrome not in here? Why is, you know, all this stuff not in here? But you can get it, and it's not that difficult. The pre-installed packages, they have a pretty good amount of stuff, other than what I just installed. It comes with, they have Matrix on here, which is their chat for using to getting a hold of these guys. You know, if you need help. I've never used Matrix, so I don't really know anything about it. So I'm not going to like sign in or anything, but because I really don't know anything about it. But I think this is where you can get a hold of a lot of information on Linux Mint. You can talk to the developers possibly there and things like that. The system settings, very straightforward. You can do all your system settings stuff here. I would go through here if I was you and just tweak things and look around at things. Oops, wrong password. Firewall looks like it's not enabled by default, maybe, but you can enable your firewall. So if you want to set up your firewall, there's your driver manager. If you want to open that up again, that will give you access to any drivers that you need. Again, there's not going to be anything on here. You can also get your software resources here. So this will kind of show you, again, what was on that welcome screen. So if anything you missed on that welcome screen, you can come here to system settings. It's going to have everything. Your printers. I said it would automatically detect my printer, but since I'm on this virtual machine, it's probably not going to set up my printer automatically. I don't know if it'll see it on the server using this, because this is kind of a this isn't set up on my main network, so it's probably not going to see any of my printers or anything like that. But generally speaking, it will. If for some reason your printer isn't located or doesn't automatically come up, you can usually add, and if it's a network printer, it'll see it. If you're still having an issue, just Google it. There's going to be somebody who's had the same problem. Look up your printer model and say install on Linux Mint. Go to Google and check it, and I guarantee you're probably going to find a way. Somebody else has had the same issue, and they'll teach you how to figure that out. I don't have Wi-Fi on this system, but you can connect your Wi-Fi. There'll usually be an icon down here. Like I say, I'm on wired right now, but your Wi-Fi would be here, and you can connect Wi-Fi and all that. Lots of different startup applications. This is cool if, for one, you're wanting to make it a little less bloated on boot. You don't want the NVIDIA Prime booted up. You don't want your SSH. You don't want printer or Bluetooth. You don't want any of this stuff starting up when you start your system. You can just disable it. You can also add anything you want to start up. So say you have a custom command, say update, and for some reason you want to do sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. I wouldn't necessarily recommend doing that, but you can do it. I'm curious if that works. But you can have special commands to run. This is good too if you're wanting to set up an rsync or back up some files or do something particular on startup or shutdown, I believe, as well. But you can do that. Oh, it already has NeoFetch installed. I didn't know that. So NeoFetch is just a little program that kind of shows you information about your system and gives you a cute little icon. Do we have curl? Yeah. What is that? Is that right? Yeah. Haven't you? Yeah. It ain't gonna look good on here, but there you go. Just a cute little thing. If you're wanting to check your weather in a terminal and you don't want to use a terminal application, you can just do curl wttr.in, and that'll give you your forecast for a couple of days and shows you what's going on. We've had so much rain lately. It's nice to see some sun. So that's kind of a cool little command you can do there. So anyway, this is Linux Mint. It is pretty cool and simple system. It's extremely easy to install. It's super easy to install. It comes with almost everything you need. This is like I've never really got this to work well, but this is something where you can watch some TV and movies, I think, for free. I don't know anything about it, so I never really messed with it. I don't know if it really works or not. Celluloid, this is kind of a video player. Don't know if it does audio or not, but this will be like a video player. Let's see here. You got power statistics. So if you're really wanting to know, this is good for like laptops if you want to know your power consumption, things like that. You can toy around with your login screen. Add different things to it if you're wanting, to tweak the theme, or that's that where you first type in your password. You can do some tweaks with that here too. So it's very customizable. There's lots of things you can do with it. Let's see, where is it? I thought I saw. Of course, you got your Bluetooth manager, so you can set up your Bluetooth devices, which I think work pretty well on here. Not sure what Nightlight is. I was at like one of those. I really never mess with these sort of apps. Supposed to, I think, change your color scheme based on what time of day it is. I don't know. Tiling, you can toy around with different types of tiling and things like window snapping, stuff like that. Color, that's if you need to adjust your color profile of your monitor. A rhythm box, there's the music player, yeah. So this is just, you can set up your playlist and import your music and things like that. Graphics, I don't think they have GIMP installed automatically. Pix is just an image viewer. I installed Steam, it doesn't come automatically. There's another image viewer. So that's like an image organizer, yeah. Drawing, this is like MS Paint basically. You can just draw and play around. A very basic drawing program. Again, like MS Paint, if you ever remember that. What else we got here? Disk Analyzer. It kind of shows you how much disk space you're using, which is good to know. It comes with LibreOffice installed automatically, so you have an Office program. Very good compatibility with Microsoft Windows, works great with that. You can change your themes in here. I think I already went through that. Again, this is a fairly lightweight system. They don't install everything in the kitchen sink, but it does install enough stuff to get you up and running, to everything you need to run. Transmission is this is for torrents. I don't know, a lot of especially Linux distributions release their ISOs and things like that through torrent files, which is like a peer-to-peer download system. So you know, if you need to download an ISO and all they have is the torrent file, you can use that. We have the terminal, which is what we were playing with. I think it is Control Shift and Plus will make it larger if you need to. You can also go in here and change your preferences. They got lots of settings and preferences, so you can make it larger by default if you want to, and do lots of toying around with it. So that's about all I've got for you today. It's a good system. I had a video on Zorin OS. This is similar. I would probably recommend Linux Mint over Zorin as your first system, but both are really great as a first system into Linux, and lots of people stick with it. I know lots of people that have installed Linux Mint and just keep using it. My son has a Linux Mint system that he uses, and again, like I said, my wife used Linux Mint for a little while, but we switched over to Bazite for gaming. That being said, this does game fairly well too. It's just Bazite is pretty easy to manage, you know, for like my wife and stuff. Warpinator is an interesting one. This is basically for sharing files, I believe, between two systems. Especially if you have like two Windows Mint systems set up, you can. Yeah, it's not going to find anything because I don't have anybody using it. But Warpinator is sort of an easy way to share files between computers. Especially if you're using like a couple of Windows Mint computers, you can share files between them really easy. And that's really about it. This is a great system. Like I say, it's based off of Ubuntu, so a lot of things that work in Ubuntu will work just fine here. It's a gorgeous system. It works really fast. It's a fun system to use. Everything really does kind of just work out of the box with very little problems. I've ran into very, very few problems ever using this system, other than if I've had a extremely brand new system. I've had some issues where I've had to install newer kernels and things like that. Don't toy around with installing Mesa, because that crashed on me when I tried to update a Mesa that wasn't designed for this system. So honestly, if you keep it stock and just use it as is, it's going to work pretty good. I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate you checking out my videos. If there's anything you want me to look at or take a look at on Linux Mint, or any other distributions you want me to check out, hey, leave me a comment. I'll try to take a look at it. I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate it if you like the video. I would really appreciate it subscribing to the channel. I try to put out a few little videos like this from time to time, and I really do hope you enjoy it. God bless all y'all, and I thank you.